Hello, everybody. I hope you're all feeling a bit more relaxed now you're not on a DLR. It took me about 2 hours to get in this morning, and not a pleasant journey. So I'm going to talk to you today about data and the cloud. I'm sure you're riveted and really excited by the prospect of a talk on data and the cloud. So just to change things up a bit, I'm going to start with a story. Who of you in the room know what TV character this is? Okay, not many. This could be a hard one. This is Tony Soprano from a very famous box set called The Sopranos. Now, The Sopranos was probably the ultimate first box set before Netflix and everything took off. This was an epic over many, many years, and it told the story of a New Jersey mafia family. And I watched this program over many, many years, and it took that long because you watch it, and then you wait for the next series, and then you lose track and what have you. And whilst I was watching it, people that had seen the end kept saying to me, "You've got to wait for the end. This is the best ending ever." And you get a lot of that these days with box sets and Netflix and the rest of it. So naturally, I was quite excited. So the evening arrived, and my wife and I settled down to watch the last episode of The Sopranos. And I was very excited, so packed the kids off to bed early, got myself a nice cold beer, settled in for the final episode. And as the episode was going along, I was a bit worried. I was like, I can't see where this big ending's coming from. And looking at the clock and 5 minutes to go, and I was getting a bit worried. And then all of a sudden, the screen, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert, but I'm sure you can catch up for yourself. The screen just goes black, and that's it. It's over. And my first reaction was to shout at the TV. I was like, "No! There's a power cut. The internet's gone down. What's happened?" And I just couldn't understand it. It was almost as if the writers, after many, many years of this show, had just kind of gone, "Oh, I don't know how to end this. Just do a black screen. Just do some arty thing at the end." And so I did what people do these days, and I Googled it. What happened at the end of The Sopranos? And I looked at YouTube videos, and it was bugging me. And the next day, I was chatting to my wife. I was like, I can't figure out what happened here. Why did the screen suddenly go black? Everyone was saying this is such a great ending, but for me, it just felt poor. And the director of the show was really cagey. He didn't want to give away exactly what was going on, and he wouldn't reveal to anybody what had happened in this famous last episode, except for this one thing he said. If you look at the final episode really carefully, it's all there. And so I did a bit more research, and I unleashed the power of the internet, the power of Google, and all the other people that were dissecting what on earth had happened in this episode. And it transpires that I was a bit too thick to see what was going on. In the last episode, and in particular in that very last scene, was a huge amount of symbolism, quotes, references, and as it transpired, a trail of breadcrumbs had been laid many years before by the writers, and it all pointed to this pivotal scene at the end of the show. And when I understood it, it was amazing. And so now I'm one of those people that say, "Oh, you've got to watch the end of The Sopranos, it's amazing," because I get it. What on earth has that got to do with data and the cloud? Well, it struck me in preparing this that for many businesses out there, this is true of where you might be at, in that you have all of the information in front of you contained within your systems and your databases, but you may lack some of the tools and insights to actually understand that data and get the most from it. So I'm going to talk to you today about data and the cloud. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the problem of data and how businesses are struggling to harness that data. I'm going to talk to you about Google's heritage as a data company and how we're now using machine learning and AI to try and get the most out of that data. And I'm going to end with 6 tips on how you can try and transform your business through better use of data. We all know that data is exploding. There's lots spoken about big data. In the last 2 years, there was more data generated than the previous 5,000 years of human history. By 2025, there's going to be 163 zettabytes of data in the world. Who knows what a zettabyte is? Correct, it's a lot. And to help you understand, that's the equivalent of watching the entire Netflix catalog 489 million times. So data is exploding. And if you look at IoT, for example, by 2021, there's predicted to be 25 billion IoT devices, all generating data. And travel is actually predicted to be the biggest industry that's going to contribute to that area. But we don't often stop to think about what data actually is. Many slides that talk about data will show the ones and the zeros, some kind of abstract thing that somehow you've got to get your head around, and somehow you should have a strategy about data. But think for a moment with your own businesses what that data actually is. It's your knowledge, it's your experience, it's your customer information, and ultimately, it's your competitive currency. They say now that every business is a data business, because that is going to be the true currency that transforms businesses in the future. And much like my Sopranos example, all the data is typically there, buried in transactional systems, search engines, are absolute goldmine of data, things that you can really transform your business with. But for the most part, data is dormant. It's estimated that less than 0.5% of the world's data is actually analyzed. But why does this even matter? We'll put some numbers on it. A Forrester study showed that for the average Fortune 1000 company, 10% increase in data accessibility and usage actually equated to a $65 million net income. Now, it's really key here. This is not 10% more data. This is 10% improvement in data accessibility and usage. So the money and the figures stack up. But why is data analytics still so hard? If it's that crucial, why aren't more of us doing a better job with it? Data often goes unsynced, unused, untapped, leaving business advantages on the table. And a few reasons for this. One, legacy applications. Think about your own businesses that have grown up over time. You may have on-premise systems connecting to third-party systems, connecting to cloud services. And what you end up with is kind of a patchwork, a kind of IT equivalent of a Frankenstein, this lumbering beast where data struggles to talk to different departments. This and data silos are generally the two biggest challenges that enterprises face in making best use of data. A changing view on data. I'm going to talk in a minute about unstructured data. Just things like reviews, pictures, videos, audio files. We're seeing a huge rise in the amount of unstructured data. We all know that GDPR has changed things as well in terms of the rules and the regulatory requirements for holding data. And finally, data science is becoming one of those industries where there's simply not enough people to go around. Are there any data scientists in the room? One. Did you arrive by helicopter today? They're well paid. There's not enough of them, they're well paid. So how can you democratize access to data, accessibility, and usage? Just talked about unstructured data. Less than 1% of all unstructured data is currently analyzed or used at all. So how can you begin to make sense of like this free-form data that's coming in faster and faster and huger amounts? And for data that does behave and sit within nice relational databases and conforms to all the rules, less than 50% of all this data is actually being used to make decisions at all. Let's think about a marketing department. The average company invests in 16 different marketing technology platforms, which will leave a ton of different blind spots. Why? Well, you may have individual systems all doing individual jobs. Take your CRM as an example. Your CRM may be doing a wonderful job as a CRM, but how much more potent and powerful could it be if it was connected up to the different systems that you also operate within marketing? Think of the hidden benefits hidden within those different silos. So one solution to this is to put all of your data into one place. And being from Google Cloud, I would say you should put that all in Google Cloud. Why should you do this? You may already have your data in one place anyway. 3 V's help explain why. V number 1, volume. With the cloud, it's instantly scalable. The cloud is elastic. So let's say in January you see a huge spike as people book their holidays. Well, the old way of doing things was to build a system that was robust enough to handle the traffic on that one period in January, and the rest of the year it may go unused. It's like building a house for 100 people and then having that house just for a Christmas party on one day. The cloud lets you just rent the space and then give it back when you've finished. Velocity is the second V. You want your data to be agile. You want it to be streamed. And thinking about pricing, dynamic things like occupancy, things are changing so quickly. You don't want to rely on overnight batch updates. You want to get your data in and get it out to do something with it. And the third V, variety. And since you don't have to worry so much about the type of data and the amount of data you put in, you can put any kind of data in there, even if you don't analyze it at the moment. It might be that you find that other parts of the business can use that data in some way you hadn't thought of. So what does Google know about data? And how can our experience help you? So this was my search that I did. The last episode of The Sopranos had a lot of hits, by the way, so I'm not the only one. Behind this very familiar tool, this search bar, is that, which is a mountain of infrastructure and data. Now, Google's been around for about 20 years now. In fact, we just had our 20th anniversary. And when the founders decided to build this product, the computing power simply didn't exist. They tried to index the entire World Wide Web, make it always available, instantly searchable. So we had to think of new ways of doing things, new ways of handling data and building the required infrastructure to support that. And what we're trying to move towards now in terms of Google Cloud is a similar philosophy. We don't want to make or let businesses worry about maintaining that bit underneath, which is really hard. We want to be able to give you the tools to ask a question, ask a query, and get an answer back. Google's mission statement is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And it's a bold mission statement. It's as true today as it was 20 years ago. A couple of interesting things about this. Number one, the infrastructure required to deliver on that is not to be underestimated. Google are a data company. We continue to be a data company, and we're continuing to solve huge data challenges. The second point is that more recently we're using machine learning and AI to get more value and relevance from that data. And now AI and ML are baked into pretty much every product that Google has and that you'll use in your day-to-day life. And as we continue to grow and release more products, Google has now 7 products with over 1 billion users each. In fact, I need to update the slide because it's 8. So Google Drive is now the 8th brand that has over 1 billion users. Those products are always available, always online. And a couple of years ago, Google decided to externalize that computing power. All of the engine room that powers these products and services is now available to any business to run their own infrastructure on. We've done a lot of the hard work. We've invested millions and millions in global networks and data centers so that you can have your time back to do what you know, write code, build better businesses, and not worry about the plumbing. So Google is now an AI-first company, and we're actually the single biggest investor in AI of all the different tech companies out there. Excuse me. We're using ML across the business, as I've just said. One nice example, just to show you how it permeates across everything we do, is in Google Cafes. Now, Google is famous for its perks, and one of those perks are lots and lots of micro kitchens, as they're called, and free food. When you join Google, you have something called the Google Stone, because you can't get over how wonderful it is to have free food, and you eat and you eat and you eat. And in the second month, you usually join the gym and lose the stone again. So we actually applied machine learning to food consumption within our own cafes. All the data was there. Every employee taps in and out of the cafes. And we're able to optimize how much food we order to eliminate wastage. So a very simple example, but a practical example of how we use machine learning to understand the data that was already there. A few other examples for you. I'm guessing many of you will use Gmail. And Smart Compose and Smart Reply is a new feature that was launched recently. This basically is a machine learning model that tries to extract the sentiment and the meaning from an email and serve up suitable responses. The idea here is that we're using machine learning to analyze millions and millions of emails to build a model, and it's not to be underestimated how hard it is for a computer to understand social context, etiquette, and that kind of thing. What we're doing here is using machine learning to eliminate some of the drudgery of day-to-day life. I sat in a talk yesterday, and one of the questions was, will machine learning replace people? And that whole debate is a lot of people have strong views on that. Well, here's an example where the machines are helping us. They're actually giving back some time so that we can go and focus on what's important. What I love about this is that in 2009, this was a Google April Fool's joke. It was considered to be so outlandish and hard to do that it was worthy of a joke. And then just 6 years later, we launched a product. And a few months after that, it accounted for 20% of all mobile replies. Taking this a step further, I'm going to talk to you now about the KLM example. So KLM use the same kind of technology that I just explained in Gmail. But they've also hooked it up using Dialogflow, which is a Google Cloud chatbot engine, so that can actually transact a booking from start to finish. So the chatbot's able to understand sentiment, understand the meaning, but then also connect up to booking systems and fulfill that order. The interesting thing here is that this agent is able to draw upon the collective experience of all those customer interactions that it's had before. And it keeps learning, and it keeps getting better and better and better. So it's fully optimized. And another example, which is kind of has parallels with my Sopranos example, but it's a bit more serious, is how we apply machine learning to our own data centers. Now, most of you will know that a data center, much like your laptop, the hardest thing to do is to keep them cool. These machines generate huge amounts of heat, and they have big industrial cooling towers and cooling systems that help keep everything cool. Now, the problem we have is that these systems are actually quite slow to react. So if you have a sudden change in the environmental conditions, you can't just say, you can't just adjust the system and it reacts immediately. It takes a few days. So our team took all the historical data from all the sensors contained within our data centers. They looked at environmental data, weather data, and were able to build a model that optimized and predicted our energy consumption. And the effect was that we reduced by 40% the cost of cooling those data centers. All the data was there. We just needed the tools to extract that insight. And finally, before I move on to my 6 steps, I'm just going to talk through a few customer examples of how they've used data or machine learning for the good. AirAsia is a phenomenal story of growth. Many of you will know about that. We heard them speak at Google's conference, actually at London Excel a few weeks ago. In 2001, they had 2 planes. They now have 1,500 flights a day, serving 300,000 passengers. Consider for a moment the data that generates. Every time a customer moves, every time a plane comes in for refueling, the data is enormous. Their founder, Tony Fernandez, decided that in order for them to be competitive, in order for them to win, they needed to have a data-first strategy. They recognized the importance of all the data signals coming in and how to harness them. They now use Google Cloud to consolidate all of their different data sources into one place, and they're using that to make better decisions about their customer journey. They're also now starting to use machine learning to mine that data and see how it can improve things like ancillaries. Spotify. I'm sure many of you here use Spotify. Spotify are the masters of personalization. A little while ago, it used to be that they would serve up one bespoke playlist a week. They're now able to do up to 7 a day, I think, if I remember correctly. And the way they were doing that is now to move a lot of their data analytics and infrastructure onto Google Cloud so their developers now don't have to worry about the plumbing and the infrastructure. They can just focus on writing code and getting results back really quickly. I'm going to skip this one for time. There is another Ocado example. Machine learning is often used to make sense of unstructured data. So I spoke about how unstructured data is growing very rapidly in all sorts of different forms. And it's hard to understand for lots of systems because it doesn't follow many rules. And machine learning is a great way of harnessing unstructured data. And there's one really great example here from Ocado, who, by the way, are an amazing brand. If you're not from the UK, you may not know them, but they're an online-only supermarket. They've built a technology platform, and for all intents and purposes, are actually now a technology company. They're exporting this platform to lots of other global supermarkets as their go-to platform for fulfillment and for delivery. One of the issues they had with 500,000 customers in the UK was they got a lot of chatter and a lot of incoming customer messaging every day. And they needed to prioritize what to answer first. So you can see in a moment that someone's saying, hey, driver was great, thanks so much. Whilst that's wonderful, it's not critical to reply to immediately. So they used machine learning algorithm to be able to understand the sentiment and the urgency of these emails and then categorize them. So somebody that has to urgently move their delivery slot would be dealt with by a human much faster than the other example. So a very simple example, but highly effective. So we're in a really exciting time for data and analytics, AI, ML. As it stands now, about 4% of all CIOs have started on the journey of using AI to better utilize their data. But there's an arms race here, and with all new technologies, it's predicted that by 2020, 85% of all CIOs will be deploying AI. But it's not who has the best algorithm who wins, it's who has the most data. And this is hard for some people because you always want to look at the new shiny thing. You want to get some data scientists in their helicopters to write some nice algorithms. But actually, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. You have to get your data sorted first. We think of data as the kind of the soil from which you can plant loads of other things and get many different benefits from. So, to wrap up, I've adapted a guide written by the Harvard Business Review, the 6 steps ahead if you want to transform your business with data. Number 1, start at the top. This is very easy to say, but any program to transform your data strategy requires the leaders in the business to get behind it. I'm working with a customer at the moment who has a stated ambition of being an ML-first company by 2020. And what really impressed me is that they decided this in a leadership offsite, and it's very easy to have a 2020 vision. Everyone's got a 2020 vision because conveniently it's going to be 2020 in 2 years. But they actually acted upon it. So every department from marketing, HR, all the way through the business, they now have a program of educating people on the benefits of data science and machine learning and a real effort to make that accessible to all. Put the customer first. Again, this is thrown around a lot. Everyone says, yeah, put the customer first. It's quite a cheap and easy thing to say, but put the customer first. Try not to look at a shiny new piece of technology and think, how can we shoehorn that into our business? I heard a lot of people talking about AR, VR, all these types of things, and they may have some merit, but put the customer first. How can you make a real difference using data to your customer journey? And to do this, you can prioritize your use cases. There are many consultancies that will come and help you do this, but to be honest, you can just have an offsite or an internal meeting amongst your leadership, and you can think through the use cases that are going to have the biggest impact on your business immediately. Where are the problems? Where are the gaps? Where are the blind spots? And what is going to have the biggest impact on your business? Number 4, get your data in order. It's been the kind of theme of the talk so far. But what about those companies that don't have C-level sponsorship to transform their whole data strategy? Well, you can make a start. Earlier on, I showed you the stat that said for 10% increase in data accessibility and usage can equate to a 65 million net income increase for Fortune 1000 companies. Just making a start and accessing the data that's readily available and trying to use some machine learning or at least remove some data silos can have a big, big business impact. Map out the transformation. So you figured out what you want to do to improve your customer journey. So what are the tools? What are the tools you're going to use? Is that going to be cloud? How are you going to design your systems to cope with that? One really important point here is anything you do with data, you have to build for scale. Data isn't going to suddenly stop. We're not going to finish this conference and all of a sudden data's finished. Right, we've got enough, let's just deal with it. Data is going to keep growing exponentially. We looked earlier at IoT, the connected devices. Data is here to stay and it's going to grow and grow. So anything you do in terms of architecting your systems should be able to scale up and down. And finally, where possible, try to democratize data and machine learning. At Google, we're moving towards a serverless philosophy. So what does that mean? That basically means that let us worry about some of the plumbing. Let us worry about the infrastructure. And let your experts, your developers, do what they're good at doing, which is writing code and solving business problems. And to do this, you can select tools which make access to data analytics and to machine learning something that everybody can do. OK, so that's the end of the talk. I don't know if there's going to be any Q&A. Sorry?
2 questions.
2 questions is fine, yeah. And if I can't answer them, I've got 2 of my engineers here. Ask them what a zettabyte is. I think you need the mic.
Hi, thank you for that talk. It was really interesting. So just very quickly, you painted a lovely picture of utilizing data in order to make better decisions. I think for the reality, and maybe have some advice on that, but in reality, accessing that data usually poses problems. So whether it's, take a hotel, for example, you're accessing the PMS system, you're trying to extract data through an API, it doesn't come out in a clean way, you've got a mess there, and you have to have developers and people that understand that in order to get that to a beautiful dashboard to put forward to the chairman, who then ultimately makes a decision for the business.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's not always easy. Definitely, there's tools out there where possible. We've seen businesses that have achieved this kind of thing, and there's various things you can do. One I would say is try and use open standards and open source products where possible, so that you start to develop common languages between your businesses. API gateways. Google owns the company Apogee, which manages all those different APIs. So there are steps you can take. I'm not suggesting, it's very easy for me to stay here and say, yeah, consolidate all your data and everything's going to be fine. I do appreciate, and we work with many businesses where the practical steps involved in doing that are quite hard. But there are areas where you can make a start. And you should also be challenging your own suppliers to start using open source standards so that you can benefit from widely available products.
Hi, hello there. I'm Catarina. I'm from Portugal. I work in a consultancy company called TH2, and for quite a while, I've been the developer. Most of the things inside the company are developed by me, but what I wanted to talk about is, for quite a while, I've been working with the tools of Google Business in particular, since they were free. I had that advantage. I still have that account. But for my hotels, the hotels I work with, my clients, I sell them. I kind of impose them to buy the domain and Google business their businesses. The question is, are those tools of sharing and everything okay for the hotels to manage themselves? Because what Google have been developing so far are tools for the non-developers to manage to work with by themselves. So can the hotels work or use these tools of sharing, particularly the sharing part of the case studies you've shown? Are they easy to use and manage?
Yeah, and what I'll say is that if anyone wants to have specific conversations, we're going to be around. We have 2 engineers here. The Google Cloud Platform is very accessible. You know, anyone can use it and anyone can start it just by putting a credit card in the system. You know, some of the machine learning examples I gave, even I can do it, and I'm not a developer. You know, we have pre-trained machine learning APIs for things like vision translation is probably something you all use. We have a B2B version of the translation tool, so you can translate websites or customer chat. So I think for the examples that you're citing, you can have a chat with us afterwards. But yeah, we're definitely trying to make it, and I think every cloud provider is trying to make it accessible to all and use open standards where possible. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Round of applause.